Heidi Ho Winslows, this is Mrs. Pin coming to you from Pennsylvania with Mrs. Pin's podcast on pinball. And last week, I actually started this podcast for my husband. We were watching the Texas Pinball Convention, and I was sitting here watching Jack Danger eat a pulled pork sandwich and just made some random comment elbowing my husband about how I could make a podcast better than his, which I doubt is true. But just to prove my point, I uploaded a app on my phone where I could record, and I made a pinball podcast commenting on Jack Danger's pinball podcast. So this has actually become this crazy thing that we've gotten really into. And today is my 9th wedding anniversary. And part of my husband's gift is that I promised him that I would make Pinball Podcast number 2. So here it is. And I've really been thinking about what the purpose of this podcast is going to be. And honestly, I think it stems from the fact that while there are a handful of total badass pinball women, it's a field really predominantly comprised of men. So I kind of want to bring a little bit of hormones into the mix in a good way, hopefully, and, give a woman's perspective on all of the stuff that's going on in the pinball world, and also give people who don't know much about pinball like a brief tutorial on some of the major players in pinball in terms of the companies and the manufacturers, the engineers and the coders and whatnot. But also, basic rules and etiquette and things like that. I, no lie, just went on Amazon.com trying to find a Pinball for Dummies book. I'm sure you've seen those books out there before. They have literally hundreds of topics. They have everything from auto repair for dummies to hacking for dummies. I found crocheting for dummies, managing type 2 diabetes for dummies, sewing for dummies. I mean, they really have everything, but they don't have pinball. And I was legit going to go on and buy a Pinball for Dummies book if they had one out there. But they don't. So part of the reason that I'm going to do this podcast is just to educate people who don't know anything about pinball. And as I mentioned in my first podcast, I am just a spouse of a pinball fanatic, making it through another day. And I've kind of been dragged along on this pretty awesome ride. And I want to continue doing that and continue learning, not only for my husband so that I don't seem like such a dumbass all the time, but also for myself, because it is a hobby that is pretty amazing. So today we're going to talk about a couple of different things. I'm going to start out by saying happy anniversary to my husband, Dr. Pin. And he's on call today, so he's spending the day at the hospital. But as I said, part of his gift this year is this podcast. So, sorry, honey. I don't know what else to say about it. But right now in our lives, we own 2 pinball machines. We have a Ripley's Believe It or Not, and we have a Terminator 2. And we've had them in our house for maybe 6 months. And myself, my husband, our kids, our entire families, everybody that we know has just kind of fallen in love, become obsessed with pinball. Our neighbor's looking into buying a pinball machine because we have 2 pinball machines. So we started this super cool trend. We like to think we're super cool over here at our house. And so because we bought these machines, I told my husband, I was telling him for years, let's redo our basement. It's unfinished. He's like, no, we shouldn't do it. We need to be responsible. Mortgage, kids' college funds, insurance, blah, blah, blah. And, we did the right things and we, saved away for all of those things. But finally, I was like, listen, if you're not going to do the basement, buy yourself a pinball machine. And he was like, all right. So he goes out, he starts looking for these pinball machines. And neither of us really had any idea how much the different pinball machines run in terms of, they're all, for the most part, used machines. The 2 that we bought were used, but we had them refurbished and, made them really awesome. But we had no idea in terms of cost what we were getting ourselves into. So it came down to, do we buy a brand new machine? We were looking at Wizard of Oz at the time. Do we buy a brand new, nobody has played it, straight off the factory floor? Or for a similar cost, do we buy two other machines that have a little more of the retro feel? And in the end, I was like, this is like no contest. We can have two amazing retro, like incredible games in our house, or we can have one. No. So we went for two. But once we got these machines in our house, we realized that even with headphones, these things are loud. And as of right now, we have them in our spare bedroom upstairs in our house, which happens to share walls with our two daughters, and their bedrooms. So as soon as the kids went to bed, playing pinball was kind of a no-no. Bedtime is sacred in this house, and I don't care what it is, but that you don't mess with bedtime. So after that, after realizing that, he couldn't play at night, my husband was like, all right, I think it's time to do the basement. We really need a space for this. We really have to have it. So it's like a running joke in our house because now we're having our basement redone. And as they're redoing the basement, the entire basement literally is revolving around our pinball machines. And our hope in the future, my husband's dream, to have like an entire basement filled with machines. And so they are literally planning all of the electrical outlets, all of the lighting. We're going to have a faux brick focal wall behind the pinball machines. We've gotten pinball art, all of the posters of all of our favorite machines, all of his favorite machines. And we've had them framed and we're getting ready to put them up, and it's going to be crazy incredible. But just to warn you out there, spouses, pinball is an expensive hobby, and it kind of spirals. Like, not only do you have to buy the machines, but then you need some basic equipment to, do the little tweaks and fixes that you need to do. And then, you end up spending like a few $100s on just like basic tools that you might not have in your house. And then all of a sudden you're redoing your basement, and not only have you bought two pinball machines, but now you're spending $50,000 to redo your basement as well. So word to the wise, just make sure that before you seriously start investing in pinball machines, that you've got some cash socked away, because it sucks it all up. Okay, so as we continue here, I have to let you know that I am using an app that has, because it's free, it has a 15-minute speaking limit or recording limit. So I'm not sure who on earth would want to listen to me speak for more than a 15-minute time slot, but I know that our podcast last time kept going and going and going, and it surprised all of us. But now I have to let you know that I have about 7 minutes left of my 15-minute limit. So this is going to be a pretty short podcast until I see whether or not it's something that, my husband and I really enjoy doing, or, see if it's worth purchasing an app that, can record for longer periods or whatnot. So in the last 7 minutes here, I'm going to go over some of the basics. This is for all of us pinball dummies out there. And I'm going to start, I debated whether or not I should start with important people in the pinball community, the rules, general rules of playing pinball. And ultimately I settled on needing to get out there so that people aren't confused, some of the different companies that make pinball machines. So there are a handful of companies that make these machines. And I have to say that the one thing that I love about pinball is that even though all of these companies are competitors, they clearly want to have the best pinball machines. They want to have people who are raving about the games that they're making. They all want to have, the who's who of pinball helping them engineer and code for these new machines. But it is a community. And even if people work for different companies. If you watch any of these crazy nerdy pinball conventions, and I mean that in a very loving way, but if you watch any of them live stream on Twitch or on online anywhere, you'll see that even if people work for different companies, that it is just this overall love of pinball that all of these people have. And it really brings everybody together, which I think is a super, super cool thing. There's not much negativity in the world of pinball. There's a little bit of drama. We're going to get into the Real Housewives situations that are going on at some point in these podcasts. But for now, we're going to talk about some of the main companies that have made pinball machines in the past and that continue to make them today, along with the new companies that have come out to make pinball machines. Okay, so to start the crash course in the most famous pinball companies, I'm going to go back to two of the oldest companies, and they are, to start, we're going to start with Williams. This is a company that no longer exists, but all of their games are still out there, and they have made some that are seriously amazing. Some of the games that they've made are Medieval Madness, which has that super cool castle in the background. They made Pinbot, which is very famous, Addams Family, Twilight Zone, and many, many more. And Williams is no longer around today, like I said, but people consider them to be one of the best pinball companies to make these machines in history. So back when Williams started in the 70s, another company called Stern was also started. And Stern is an anomaly, a bit of an anomaly, because today they are one of the only companies that has sustained themselves throughout the entire time pinball has been around, or for most of that time. And they've made games like Star Wars, Guardians of the Galaxy, Metallica, Ghostbusters. If you go to any pinball arcade, you will definitely find machines both by Stern and by Williams. The two other companies that I want to touch on quickly in my last couple minutes. One of them is a relatively new company, and that's called Jersey Jack. It's based in New Jersey, and they have made some amazing, very cool, so many bells and whistles, great lighting, amazing coding. They've made Dialed In, The Hobbit, Wizard of Oz, and I believe they just announced that they're going to remake Pirates of the Caribbean. So they are, kind of the new kids on the block, relatively speaking, but they have made some incredible machines, and very complex games that you probably would have no idea how to play unless you looked into it before you actually got to the games. So they're a relatively new company as well. And the last company that I'm going to talk on, and again, I'm only touching on a few of these companies today, but these are some of the big ones that have relevance right now in our house. And the last one is American Pinball. And this company is brand new, but they are putting out, or they have put out, they've actually started shipping these, a new game that my husband is obsessed with. He loves magic, and this game is called Houdini. It's got a giant, creepy Houdini head in the middle of it. It's supposedly got some super cool features. I told my husband that he could 100% buy this game, but that I had to play it first. So that's on our to-do list in the next couple weeks. But they are another company, American Pinball, that is out there and making really new, awesome games. So I'll continue with the Pinball for Dummies segments of this podcast if I continue to record it. But I wanted to say thanks so much for listening and for tuning in. To my 7 subscribers, you guys are the shit. I love you. And I think that it's hysterical that you subscribed to somebody's podcast that you have no idea who I am. But I think that makes you even better. So thanks so much for listening. And this is Mrs. Pin, over and out.